Hello, and welcome back to Getting Started with Traditional Synergy in Visual Studio. In our last video, we showed you how to create and run your solution in Visual Studio. In this video, we'll dive into creating and configuring a repository project. The repository project allows all of your projects in the solution to have access to your data structures and layouts. To start, we'll add a new repository project to our solution. To do this, right-click on the solution, go to Add, and in the sub-menu, click New Project. Here, you'll see the Templates menu again. This time, we're selecting the Synergy DE Repository Project template. This particular project template is also available for Synergy.net projects. We'll go ahead and change the name of the project to My Repository. We now have a new Synergy repository project. Notice that it only consists of the Schema file. You have two options for bringing in and maintaining your repository. You can either reference an existing repository or build from the Schema file in the project. Let's start with the simplest approach. If we right-click the project and go to Properties, on the Repository tab of the project, we see the option Use Existing Repository. If we check this option and fill in the RPS main file and RPS text file, the project will use that existing repository instead of building from the Schema file. To make changes to the repository, we can select Tools and then Synergy Repository. This tool should be familiar to anyone who has used Synergy repositories before. We'll cover it more extensively in another video. Notice, if we go to set the current repository, our path is already set to the repository we specified in the project properties. The property does this by setting the environment variables RPS mfill and RPS tfill, which means you won't need to. The other way to use a repository is by building from the Schema file. You can either add an existing schema by right-clicking the project, going to Add, then selecting Existing Item, or you can copy and paste the contents of the schema into your existing schema. The contents of this schema are identical to the repository we referenced in the project properties. You can use the repository tool to generate the schema file. As a reminder, if the option Use Existing Repository is set in project properties, the project won't build from the schema file. We'll be building from the schema, which means this option for the output path and the project properties can now be used. This is the path that the repository is going to be built to. By default, the output path changes based on your configuration, and you can manually adjust the path for each configuration or set one path for all configurations. Now, let's connect the repository project to our main process so we can use the structures in the DBR. First, we need to reference the repository project. To do this, right-click References and click Add Reference. Now we're going to the Projects tab on the left. Check the box to include our repository project. Next, let's add an include statement to our code. Finally, we'll use the repository in our Hello World example. As you can see, the solution builds and runs correctly. So now we know how to create a repository project in Visual Studio. We learned how to configure repository project properties to use an existing Synergy repository, how to add the project to an existing DBR project in the same solution, and how to use the repository project in our code. Stick around to learn more about various traditional Synergy project types in Visual Studio, or check out the description of this video for additional resources. Thanks for watching!